The idea that like that only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars is just untrue.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
okay, but
At long last, The Acolyte is upon us. After having one of the most disliked trailers of all time and one of the most hilarious comment sections on YouTube, the latest story in the Disney industrial complex finally makes itself known. My expectations for this show are lower than the ratings this show is likely to get, but even still, I am going into it with an open mind. The first episode opens up with a fight scene between May, the twin sister of our protagonist, and a Jedi master named Indara, played by Cary Ann Moss. We're about 2 minutes into this story, and I can confidently say that May will, at some point, be on the receiving end of a misguided redemption arc. But anyway, May eventually slays Indara by knife to the chest, after distracting her with an alien bartender. I will say that the fight scene itself is pretty well choreographed, and the conclusion is clever, with May using the bartender as a distraction before plunging the knife into Indara. However, the problem, as usual, comes down to the writing. What exactly is the point of this line?
With you.
Attack me, Jedi.
The fight scene clearly establishes that May is ruthless and willing to use whatever means necessary to kill Indara. Why would she willingly give her a head start in the fight? The writing already has its characters contradicting themselves, and we aren't even 5 minutes into the story. On a side note, it's hard to take this death scene seriously, since not so long ago a certain character was skewered by a lightsaber, only to be totally fine 15 minutes later. But in the interest of fairness, I will still my criticism, since Ahsoka's plot armor shenanigans are Ahsoka's plot armor shenanigans. Anyways, after this fight scene, we are introduced to Osha, May's twin sister, who is a mechanic, which is gobbledygook for mechanic in Star Wars speak. The duties of said mechanic revolve around putting out fires in space. Now, a lot has already been said about the scene. As I speak, the debate still rages on as legions of fans shed blood in the online battleground of Twitter arguments. Defenders of this show will tell you that Star Wars in general is nonsense, and you shouldn't take it seriously when it comes to anything physics related. Critics of the show will tell you that this scene should be tried for war crimes against science fiction. I am mostly in the latter camp here. I mean, yes, Star Wars isn't exactly what you would call hard science fiction. It's more like fantasy, set in space instead of Middle-earth. Yes, TIE fighters make swishy sounds in space. Yes, there has been a fire in space before. But this feels like it's breaking new ground in terms of nonsense.
It broke new ground!
I mean, there is a difference between a momentary burst of fire in space as a result of an explosion and a literal campfire that maintains combustion without oxygen. It just feels a step too far even by Star Wars standards. Being the twin sister of May, Osha is wrongly accused by the Jedi for the murder of Indara. However, while she is being transported to Coruscant, her fellow prisoners break out and leave her to crash on some remote snow-covered planet. Why did the Jedi leave her unaccompanied during her trip to Coruscant? Because of reasons not related to plot convenience, I'm sure. Despite crashing on the icy planet, Osha survives. Somewhere else on Coruscant, we are introduced to Master Saul, Osha's former master, who decides to go to said planet to investigate the crash. Now, I am a big fan of what follows. Not because it's good, mind you, but because it perfectly encapsulates the gap between the peak of Star Wars and the current state of Star Wars. There is something off about these scenes. It's subtle, you might not have noticed it, but in the words of greater men than me, your brain did. All of these people are walking around on an icy planet submerged in snow with temperatures well below zero, and they are doing so with their Coruscant robes. Not a jacket in sight on a desolate planet that looks like Hoth. Osha crashed there, so I suppose she has somewhat of an excuse. But Master Saul and his crew didn't. They went there willingly, and they brought their Coruscant collection to survey a planet that has the same room temperature as the peak of Mount Everest. You might say I am being nitpicky and making too big a deal out of this, and to that, I bring forth the scene. Being a Jedi does not grant you immunity to the elements. It provides you with a couple of well-established force powers and lightsaber abilities. But other than that, you're still human. Luke might be the man, but if he is going to patrol Hoth, he still needs to protect himself from the cold. Again, this may seem like a weird detail to focus on, but it matters.
Details matter.
Luke is wearing so many clothes here, you can barely tell it's Luke Skywalker, our protagonist. This subtly conveys that Luke may be a Jedi, but he is still vulnerable. And the world around him is a cruel, harsh, and unforgiving ball of rocky snow. It makes Hoth come alive on screen. It makes you almost feel the cold that Luke feels. When it comes to storytelling, you can't put those characters under enough clothes. Now go back to this scene. It looks hollow, flat, and lifeless. Those characters are clearly immersed in green screens with some fake snow being blown in their faces. It's painfully obvious and your brain can tell. It's a subtle detail that reveals a great deal, a great lack of care for the story. But moving on from snow-related rants, Master Saul eventually does find Osha and rearrests her, sort of. She tells Saul that her twin sister is the guilty one for killing Indara.
May is alive.
Saul, after pondering on the matter for 3/4 of a second, decides to wholeheartedly believe her.
I believe you.
Which is a bit odd, because not 2 minutes earlier, he seemed extremely confident that May couldn't be alive.
Do you think that...
No. May is dead.
There is a weird contradiction in the writing that keeps permeating this story. On a positive side note, I do like the actor who portrays this Master Saul guy. Weird writing aside, he commands a quiet and thoughtful disposition that makes for a convincing Jedi Master. Something tells me George Lucas approves of him, and I like that. Probably the only thing about this show George Lucas would approve of.
White slavers.
After all of this, we go back to May, who, now on some remote planet, meets with generic bad guy. Keeping things on brand, generic bad guy delivers a contradictory speech that contains the following sentence.
Steel or laser are no threat to them.
Mind you that by them he means Jedi. To be fair, if the Jedi in question was Sabine, this guy might have actually been right. But anyway, after generic bad guy delivers generic bad guy speech, he pulls out his red lightsaber to subtly convey to us, the viewers, that he is a Sith Lord. And with that bit of ingenious use of the show don't tell rule, episode 1 comes to a close. I came into this show with an open mind. I tried, guys, I really did.
I tried so hard.
And I will say this, at least the Acolyte didn't put me under deep sleep, which is more than I can say about Rings of Power or Boba Fett.
See you, chump.